The 2024 NFL season is upon us, and so is another season of Gun on One. Hi, everybody. I'm Derrick Gunn, and I can't wait to get this football season started. So I decided I needed a special guest to kick off this new season. It has been my pleasure to know this man and call him a friend for a long time. He is Mike Garafolo from the NFL Network and also one of the co-hosts of the Insiders. Mike, how you been, brother?
Doing great, D-Gun. I appreciate you, you calling me a friend.
Yes.
Doesn't get much better than that, pal. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Well, you know, the last official holiday is behind us now for the summer. Did you get a chance to just relax? Because, man, when football season starts, you like hit the ground running. You're like a mercenary, man.
Yeah, but I was just thinking about this in terms of before I came on with you, the Eagles offseason and Saquon signing, and you're like, that was 6 months ago, right? Like that was 6 months ago. And so I was joking with somebody earlier. I got Falcons Steelers this week, and I was talking to one of my guys at the Falcons. I said, you know, yeah, we're geared up. Oh boy, it's great to have the season finally kicking off. And I said, you know, in a couple weeks into the season, I'll be like, oh, when is this season going to be over? When we get in the off season, you're like, when is the season going to get? No, we're never happy. You know, that's how we roll. So every week one, I have the same thought. Week one and Super Bowl Sunday, I have the same thought. Mm-hmm. This is why we do what we do. And it's here, and it's a great feeling, and you can't wait to see all the things that you've been talking about. Probably not happen the way that you've been talking about them because it's so hard to predict. But to see it actually start to play out in the field, it's a great feeling.
All right, so this entire offseason, much of the discussion has been about the so-called relationship or strained relationship between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. Mm-hmm. From everything that you've heard from insiders and every bit of information you've gathered, how have you perceived it, and how do you think it will play itself out?
I think that there were a lot of strained relationships everywhere, the way that the season ended last year, across the coaching staff, in the locker room, front office, everything. And it's been a reset in a lot of ways. And so when the stories come out and you say, like, yeah, that was a thing, and they've worked on it, and they've tried to get better in a lot of regards. Jalen Hurts has done a lot of work on himself this offseason, from what I understand. And it began, you know, I talked about Super Bowl Sunday. I remember that being one of the topics we were talking about on the field at Allegiant Stadium, about Jalen Hurts and the fact that they want him to be a little bit more forward facing. They don't want him to be a phony, right? They don't want him all of a sudden be this rah-rah talkative guy if that's not really him. He's got ways of leading in his own way. But this was more about Fletcher Cox is gone and Jason Kelsey's gone. And it's like, dude, you got to step into that forefront a little bit more. And maybe they thought it was going to happen last year with the contract, because you see that all the time in this league. You get paid, and it's like, well, that's for your performance on the field and also what we expect of you off the field as well. So I think there were some moments on the sideline that we saw from afar, we read into, they downplayed. I remember that spat with him and A.J. Brown. I believe that was early last season, if I'm not mistaken. And we kind of said, yeah, man, they're poo-pooing it. And, you know, it's just guys wanting to be better. That kind of stuff needs to be cleaned up and needed to be cleaned up. And I think that there was frustration from not just Jalen Hurts, but the players toward the coaching staff on both sides of the ball last year. They had two new coordinators, didn't quite work out well. Now you've got guys with skins on the wall. Now you've got guys that have done it in a number of places and have done it to different degrees of success. So I think that that's the biggest thing there, is the relationship to the entire coaching staff. And so I think it's in a better place now. Will we be talking about it the same way in a couple of months? It's going to depend on the results, right? I mean, it's not a cop-out answer. It's just that's kind of how it's going to come to fruition here, whether it's to the upside or to the downside.
All right. So when you mention the word pressure, nobody's under more pressure in 2024 than Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. Who needs who more? Does Jalen need Nick more? Does Nick need Jalen more? Who needs who the most?
I would say, I think Nick. Listen, Jalen's got the contract. It's a lot easier to get rid of a coach. So I would say that Nick probably needs Jalen more, which is not to say that he's not capable of being a good head coach. I think 2 years ago may have been a little bit above where he was at that point, and last year was probably not representative of as good a coach. He's somewhere in the middle. Now, you like to improve, and you like to, if you're the Eagles, see him be more of that guy that you saw back in 2022 and say, that's the real Nick Sirianni. See, we told you that's the real Nick Sirianni. So I think, you know, if you're going to make a change after this season, it's much easier to swap out the coach than it is the quarterback, because they're not going to be bad enough that they're drafting in the top 5 and getting themselves, whether it's Quinn Ewers or one of these other guys coming out. So I would say that Nick probably needs Jalen more. And, you know, he's worked on that this offseason. They've all positive is the word. Like they've tried to be more positive. Right. And I did see that. I was only there for one day during training camp. I did see that the one day that I was there. I did get a chance to talk to him. We interviewed him one-on-one, and there was a different vibe. There was a better vibe. So I think that that's the biggest thing is getting that positivity, getting them to believe again in each other, and hopefully that ascends throughout the season.
You mentioned the word more, and I'm going to play off that word. Is Kellen Moore the right coordinator to bring out the best in Jalen?
I believe he's the right coordinator because it's a break from what they've done. And you've been around long enough. Like we can go back to at certain points during the Andy Reid era and even previously. Predictability is the thing you hear often, right? And we heard it during the Doug Peterson, the back end. It's like, oh, it's predictable, and guys are yelling out the play calls, and there's no motion, and there's not. Well, now you're bringing in different elements, and it's not going to be a complete break from what they did the last couple of years. There are going to be some elements that Kellen Moore is going to incorporate into what he does, and that's the feedback he's getting from Sirianni, probably from Kevin Patullo as well, who's I want to get the title right, associate head coach, and I got to get his title right, but he's probably the guy that maybe we haven't talked enough about this offseason, the importance of what he's doing, because he's trying to blend. He's working with Kellen to blend what they've done the last couple of years into what he's used to doing. So I that's why I like the move to Kellen Moore. Now, I honestly last year watching the Chargers, particularly late in games, there were a couple times where I was like, what's the thought? Like, I'd love to know what's the thought process there. Like, what? There was a game against the Cowboys where I was like, you know, and it's so easy to sit there and say, oh, the play call wasn't, but it was the thought process behind the call. And I was like, I don't know, you know. So I want to see Kellen Moore kind of rebound and start to dictate things a little bit better as an offensive coordinator.
Is it fair or unfair to say Jalen Hurts cannot fail in 2024 simply because, number one, he has one of the top 5 offensive lines in the National Football League, and number 2, no quarterback in this league has more weapons at his disposal than Jalen Hurts? So
you say like there's you look at it and say, well, how could he possibly be bad? He's got all this stuff at his disposal is what you're saying. Yeah, but I think it's more, you know, if it's a failure, if you want to use that word, it'll be what we saw down the stretch. There was an element of indecisiveness. I think he got more looks that coordinators felt like put him in a bad position or make him uncomfortable. There's a lot of pressure last year that he saw, particularly down the stretch. So they're going to have answers for that. And a lot of times the answer for that is, you know, the back out of the backfield, which they now have in Barkley. And that's something that Kellen Moore has done repeatedly over his career, is his ability to use the running back both in the running game and in the passing games. I think that's going to be a huge part of this, and that's why they spent the money on Saquon. So I think you need to see more decisive actions from Jalen Hurts. 2 years ago, that was the question about him. Can he read defenses? You know, can he manipulate things? And the reports that I was getting 2 years ago, was, man, he does a great job of coming back to the sideline at halftime, relaying to the coaching staff, here's what I'm seeing, here's what they're trying to do. So he was seeing it, and he was understanding it. And for whatever reason, that kind of fell off last year. So I think if you're going to see a failure, it's going to be that hesitancy. It's going to be a little bit of what you saw down the stretch. I don't want to see it. I mean, I like Jalen. You know, I don't ever root for a team, but that was a fun team to cover back in 2022. In the early part of last season, I get to cover them a bunch because they're in my little corridor of teams that I cover. So, you know, I want to see them competitive. I want them to be a fun team to cover.
Well, wait a minute. You just said something. You don't root for one team. You didn't grow up favoring one team that you still kind of gravitate towards.
But the problem is, and I tell this story all the time because this is the greatest example of it. When you're covering the sport, you've got to worry about what you need to do, right? So here was the greatest example of it. It's a Sunday night game. I'm working at the Star Ledger at the time. I'm covering the Giants. And the Giants are up 36-31. And the Eagles have the ball with 2 minutes left. Mm-hmm. My story has to be, because it's a night game, my story has to be in at the end of the game. So I'd already written the story, and the Eagles get the ball back, and I'm like, man, if they go down and score, I'm going to have to rewrite this whole story, right? So I'm sitting there, in a sense, if it had gone the other way, I would have did what I had to do. But in a sense, kind of rooting for the Giants, because I'm like, this story's got to go in. It's already done. It's going to be chaos if it goes up. Now, listen, if it was the other way and the Eagles were up 5, it wasn't even like it was 3. Because if it's 3, you go, well, if they kick the field goal, I got time and overtime to rewrite everything. It was like 5. It was going to be win one way or another there. I remember, and the Giants made the stop, and I was like, okay, boom, hit send, and I ran that. How can you be a fan in that moment, right? Like, how can you sit there and go, come on, Eagles, pull this thing out? And I tell people all the time, because I went up to cover the Giants in 2004, and to this day, the hardcore Giants fans that know my history still give me crap for it. And they go, Eagles fans covering the Giants. I said, I stopped being an Eagles fan when I covered the Eagles. You're too in it. You're too close. You can't really root for this stuff. I had a relationship with Donovan, who I wound up working with at Fox once he retired for a little bit. And I had a relationship, let's say, with Justin Tuck. And so Justin Tuck would sack Donovan, and I'd go, well, how am I supposed to feel about that? I like those guys. I'm supposed to be upset that so it's.
Well, of course, we both know the NFL season opening up this Thursday night, Baltimore, Kansas City. And, of course, the game in this region we're most interested in, Eagles playing the Green Bay Packers in, of all places, Brazil. Now, C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Darius Slay have both come out publicly in social media platforms and said, why are we playing in Brazil? Are you surprised the NFL decided to – and I know the NFL wants to expand globally, but putting a game in one of the most dangerous countries on the planet, are you surprised by that?
The biggest thing that surprised me was they did it in week 1, right? Like right off the bat for a number of reasons. And I do feel for the fans who, all summer long cannot wait for the season to start. You're getting week 2, which I'll be down there to cover that Monday night game against the Falcons. You are getting week 2, so at least you're getting that game right there. But I felt it's like all these fans are, first home game, you're moving it to Brazil. There are a lot of X factors at play. We have our Jane Slater down there. She's covering the game for NFL Network. All reports are that everything is great for her for what she needs to get done. So that's encouraging. It sounds like, are they traveling Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken?
Wednesday.
So they're kind of going in. It's not like they're spending 6-7 days there. So they're kind of going in and out. It's within the same relative time zone. I think maybe they're an hour ahead or whatever it is. So it's not like you're going across the Atlantic and your body clock's all messed up. So I would say the biggest surprise for me was that because they've done these games late September, early October. Teams get a couple of weeks under. I was shocked they did it week 1, but this is the global push from the NFL. Like you almost kind of have to accept that it's going to be Brazil, it's going to be Germany, it's going to be these other countries that they would love to. I don't know how they would do it. They would love to play a game in China. I know that's been talked about as well. The other thought is that you expand the season to 18 games and everybody gets an international game, which could be Mexico and Canada or whatnot. So a little bit closer to home, but I would say at least with London, they've been playing games there for close to 20 years now. And the stadiums have been used to hosting those games. This is the first time in a new country. So there's going to be a lot of uncertainties here. I know the coaches aren't thrilled with it, but they've long since accepted it since they found out the game was going to be played there.
You know what, Mike? I was surprised. We saw a lot more teams during the preseason, offensively, especially playing their starters. You go back to 2023, it was like starters were like Teflon. You weren't touching the starters, but a lot more teams have played their starters this offseason, including the Eagles' opponent, the Green Bay Packers. The Eagles did not play their offensive starters. Yeah. Could that have an adverse effect coming out of the gate on the Eagles?
I think it could, and I think that Nick Sirianni going back on I think he indicated he was going to do that and then wound up not doing that, had second thoughts about it or whatnot. Which the first game, was there a weather concern? I'm trying to remember.
Something crazy like that, yeah.
They were supposed to play or they thought about it, and then they wound up not playing them. It's the trend seems to go back and forth. And I think right now you've got Andy Reid playing his guys, and they go, well, if it's good enough for Patrick Mahomes and those guys, it's got to be good enough for us. And then you got guys like Mike Tomlin that are probably never going to change. They're always going to play their guys. So right now that seemed to be the trend, and it's a copycat league in a lot of ways. And who knows, maybe in 2028 we're talking about how nobody's playing them again because whoever won the Super Bowl didn't play them, and okay, now we're going to lean back toward that way.
All right, you look at this Eagles offense, and when it gets rolling, I mean, they're as loaded as anybody in the National Football League. And if you had to stack them, I would say the Eagles could be arguably the first in terms of talent offensively when it comes to skill position players. When this offense gets rolling, should they accidentally score 28 points a game minimum?
That's a big number, even in today's NFL, but that's where they should be in the 20s every game with the firepower that they've got. And I think that they're, I go back to, listen, the transition from Jason Kelce not being there as your center, doing so many things that he did there is going to be a huge question mark that you want to see answered. But they still have veterans on that offensive line that have been there forever. And the bookend tackles that they've got, if those guys can stay healthy, which has been a battle for Lane Johnson at times. But there's enough talent there. And the Barkley addition is intriguing to me because as I continue to tell people, I don't give out too much fantasy advice because little secret between us, I haven't won a title in like 20 years. And I tell people that all the time. Like, just because you don't want my advice necessarily.
Isn't that demoralizing? I tell people, don't ask me about fantasy football, please.
It's demoralizing because the dudes that are winning, I'm still in the Star Ledger League that I was in with general columnists and baseball writers and golf writers. And, one guy's an author now. He was a news writer at our place and he left and now he writes books. And I'm just like, shouldn't I be beating these guys? And they love to rub it in my face. So, but I tell them all the time, there's so many factors that play at fantasy football, but I tell them in regard to Saquon, for the Eagles to break the mold of we're not going to pay a running back and do what they did, they're going to get the juice, right? They're going to get the squeeze on Saquon and get everything they can get out of there, because for them to put the resources in it the way that they did, he's going to be a big part of what they do this year.
When you look at this Eagles defense, I categorize it like this. It's such a huge question mark overall. To me, it's like a soap opera, days of our lives. You don't know what the storyline is going to be day to day. When you look at this Eagles defense, I'm going to ask you two questions in one. Number one, what intrigues you most about the personnel in this defense? And number two, what will you be watching closely as this defense evolves?
It's definitely the back end with some of these young guys that are coming in, and you got Reed Blankenship coming in, not Reed Blankenship, Cooper DeJean coming in, Reed Blankenship being the safety that's going to have to take on an even bigger role than he's taken in the past, and obviously Quinion. This draft reminded me of, what was it, 2002? Maybe they went Lito Shepherd, Sheldon Brown, Michael Lewis, right. And they still had at the time, I think, Troy Vincent and Bobby Taylor. If I'm not
believe
mistaken.
So, yes. Yep.
And it was like, these guys are still here. These guys are still a big part of what they do. But we're going to, and Howie Roseman has done this for a number of years, we're going to plan 1 year ahead. And this is going to be the transition period. So it's not like it's a redshirt year for those guys. Like, they have to play. They have to contribute. They have to be starters, especially if guys start to go down, and you've got basically both of these guys on the front there. So I think that's what I'll be watching, the confidence in those guys to do what they need to do up front. Vic Fangio is not going to blitz the heck out of you. He's got schemes up front that he wants to do, but he needs to rely on his back end being solid, being in the right place, seeing things clearly on the back end there. And that's a lot to ask of some young guys potentially. So that's clearly what I'll be watching this upcoming season.
How dangerous is this Packers team for the Eagles to be opening up against? They caught fire the latter half of the season. They blew Dallas out of the water in the playoff. They had the 49ers on the ropes, and they were the youngest team in the NFL last year, and they're still one of the 2 or 3 youngest teams in the NFL this year.
Jordan Love being tied for the highest paid quarterback in the league. Tied, right? Tied. It may surprise you, but it's a team that knows what they have in him. Yeah. And part of that was they had committed to him when they drafted him. They committed to him when they traded Rodgers and turned it over to him. So now it was time financially to commit to him. It was one of the worst negotiating stances you could have as a team, because everything that you had said and done was thrown back in your face when it came to the negotiating table. But that's part of them looking forward and saying, well, we've got a guy that we feel really good about. And if we didn't do the deal when we did it this year, it was going up exponentially next year, especially with Dak Prescott potentially being a free agent. So they feel really good about him. And every time this offseason that I was doing, as I say, I was reading something script-wise or something from the research department. It's like Jordan Love was second in the league in touchdown. Jordan Love was second in the league in touchdown passes. And I go back and say, oh, wow, that was right. And so he did it not quietly. I mean, they got off to a slow start last year and then caught fire down the stretch. And you saw that their ability to go toe-to-toe with some of the better teams in the postseason there. So, yeah, I think they're certainly dangerous. You know you got to fight on your hands. This should be a game where you talk about the Eagles' offense, and there should be points on the board in this game. Now, you got the factor of go back to this is a stadium and a country and everything that's hosting an NFL game. Now, the NFL uses their people. Yeah. But still, it's a new venue, so maybe there's some kind of you never know till you start to play these things. But you know, on paper, it looks like points are going to be put up in this game.
All right, I know you're running short on time. I don't want to keep you too long, but I'm going to take a quick spin around the NFC East. Let's start with Dallas. They won the division last year. You look at all the scuttlebutt they've been through this summer leading into the season. CeeDee Lamb finally signed. Is Dallas a legitimate threat to win the division again? Hasn't happened in a long time.
Yeah, I think they are. And the reason I say that is they do a good job of not only drafting guys. See, you can draft guys. That's great. Yeah. Can you develop guys? They do a good job of developing guys and leaning on these guys as, you know, hey, well, they didn't go out and sign anybody. Well, because they feel good about what they're bringing in from a youth standpoint and their coach's ability to bring these guys along. So there are you can look at the roster right now and say, well, where's the there are guys right now that are going to contribute that necessarily you don't know what they're going to do, but they're confident in it. And I still think Dak Prescott, he catches a lot of heat, but I still like Dak. So I still see them competitive. Did they win the division? No. Are they on the plus side of 500? They're right there. So we should have a conversation in November into December around Thanksgiving. They should be playing an important game there in Dallas. The rest of the division, let's go to Washington.
Yes.
That to me is a team that could steal some games late in the year. You know, maybe you're playing for the division and they're coming in at 7-10 or maybe even 8-9 to the upside. And they've got veterans. They've got a veteran coaching staff. They're going to win some games and maybe play spoiler down the line and set themselves up to feel good for the next season. So that's how I feel about them. With the Giants, I would probably say hot
mess.
I wouldn't go that far, but there's still too many unanswered questions for me. Like even the guys they brought in, John Runyon Jr., Jermaine Illuminor, they're good players, but did you fix the offensive line? Yeah. I don't know that I can go that far, especially when you start to suffer some injuries there. So I think they could. What they have to do, their first two games are Minnesota, Sam Darnold, and then Jaden Daniels week 2, which I actually think Jaden Daniels could wind up being the rookie of the year. That's my kid. Yeah, I think he's, especially with Cliff Kingsbury calling the plays. So I think that you know, if they get off to anything other than 2-0, they're in trouble. I really believe that.
All right, because so many people do this to me, final question to you. I'm going to put you in a hot seat.
Yeah.
Super Bowl contenders this season.
Hold on.
Here we go.
I'm in North Jersey, and I got the windows
Here
open.
We go.
Any Jet fans around here? No Jet fans around. I got a feeling about the Jets this year. I got a feeling, and I'm trying not to tell them. I start to say that the Jets fans, and they lose their mind. I got a vibe about the Jets, and I have a vibe about the Jets. Even if they, let's say they're 9-8, 10-7, like wild card team, that to me is a team that could go on the road and win a couple of games in the postseason. So even if they don't go 13-4, I still feel like watch the Jets as you get into the postseason. I just feel like, you know, listen, to snap Achilles, I can't predict that, but otherwise, I feel good about the Jets. I feel good about the Packers. I do. I really do. I think they're well coached. I think they've got a lot of talent. That's a team I'm looking for. You know, San Francisco will be in the mix. Detroit will be in the mix, obviously. Yeah. And I would say if you're looking for a sleeper in the NFC, watch the Rams. Sean McVay did a good job of resetting the table last year. They feel like they're on the precipice of striking again.
So you mentioned the Packers. You know I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So I have a lot of respect for you. It just went poof way up here because you just mentioned the Packers for me. So I thank you for that, my friend, as well. All right. I gotta give you AFC real quick. So I like Cincinnati in the AFC. Okay. I like the Jets in the AFC. I mean, I can't discount the Chiefs, but I would say of those three teams, I think, you know,
2 of those will be playing in the AFC Championship game.
Ooh, okay. All right. I'm going to mark it down. Hopefully get you back on Gun on One later in the season to discuss it. Hey, man, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I know you got a lot on your plate and a lot of stuff to do. He is the one and only Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network and, of course, the Insider Show. I love that show. I watch it religiously. Hope to talk to you again down the road, my friend. Can I call you again sometime?
Absolutely, especially because I gave you a rush one right now. I got to jump on the air and take something for the Insider. So I owe you a couple of minutes on the next one. How about that?
All right, brother. Take care.
See you tomorrow. Right. Thank you, buddy.
All right, buddy. And that's going to wrap up this inaugural edition of Gun on One. So until next week, I'm Derrick Gunn, and for Mike Garafolo, stay safe, everybody, and have a great week.